Story 1. I convinced a girl who I was crazy about to go out on a date with me, and I knew I had to make it count. We lived by the ocean, and she had dropped the hint that she had never been out on the pier at our local beach. Challenge accepted. I nervously drove her down to the beach, and we proceeded to slowly walk out on the pier together, though she seemed hesitant from the beginning. We stopped short of the end, and I leaned against the railing over the water while she stood back a bit from the edge. She didn't really seem into it at all. Awkwardly, I said, "This is a great view, huh?" Just as two pigeons flew up and landed at our feet. Sweet chicks dig birds, I thought to myself. To my horror, the birds began to make passionate pigeon love in front of us, while neither of us spoke. I had never witnessed such violent passion. I quickly scanned around and saw a couple holding roses on the other side of the pier. Awesome, they look romantic. Chicks dig romance, I thought to myself. We quickly walked away from the surprisingly forceful pigeon sex and stood next the happy couple. The man and woman were holding each other and both holding roses, but something seemed off. I glanced up and noticed that both were sobbing. The girl I was with noticed too. As we were both looking, the couple took their roses and cast them into the sea. I had posted us up next to a damn funeral, some kind of sea burial. Between animal lovemaking and death, I had executed one of the worst dates of all time. Just as I had accepted my failure, my date started getting fidgety. Based off of her body language and her expression, it dawned that she hadn't told me about the pier as a hint, but because she was terrified of it. Turns out she had a fear of heights in the ocean. That pier will forever be a monument to my most unsuccessful first date. Story 2. I'd forgotten about this one until I saw the thread title. This was several years ago, before everyone had cell phones, and I didn't have one at the time. It would have made things tremendously easier. So this chick hits me up off a personal ad, and we seem to hit it off. She's a little older than I am, and the picture makes her look a little bigger than I normally go for, but whatever, she seems cool. It's kind of weird she wants to pick me up rather than meeting somewhere, but whatever. Things happen. I should have stopped everything when a dingy old Honda Civic rolls up and someone who's not a little older, but a lot older and a lot heavier than I expected gets out. But I don't, because I was young and stupid and don't want to offend her by doing the 180 back into my house when it's abundantly obvious that picture was really out of date. So I get into the car, which is full of trash, and we set out. She tells me she needs to swing by her place, and I say sure, whatever. Her place is in the projects, and I don't mean the kind of rundown but still nice part of town. I mean the actual housing projects. She invites me inside, and I figure it's better than sitting in the car waiting to get shot and robbed, so I join her inside, where I meet her boyfriend and kid, neither of whom she'd thought to mention before. Her boyfriend is remarkably laid back about me wandering in, apparently on a date with his girlfriend, and promptly offers me some of his drugs. Now, I'm not against doing drugs, but I only do them when they come from sources I trust, and when I'm around people I trust. So I decline, mainly because even with my experience, I can't identify the mounds of colorful pills and other paraphernalia he's selecting from. Also for obvious reasons. Her kid, meanwhile, is toddling around oblivious while the girl does whatever it is she's doing in the bathroom. Dude drops his pills and eats what looks like blotter acid, and we wind up watching The Simpsons like some weird extended family. It turns out that he didn't know exactly what he'd combined either, and he starts having a freak out. And since she's in the bathroom and the toddler is a toddler, guess who's stuck talking him down? Especially because he's talking about God talking to him and God's telling him things that aren't exactly making me any more comfortable in this incredibly awkward situation. But I've done this before. I have a lot of hedonist friends, and staying calm and talking someone through a surprisingly hallucinogenic experience is something I'm comfortable with. At least compared to exiting stage right into the heart of the ghetto as it's getting dark or getting murdered if his trip takes a bad turn. She comes out sometime later to find him naked on the floor. His clothes had gotten too hot, and were also gradually getting smaller and going to kill him, you see, with his eyes shut while I calmly try to talk him through what were apparently some weapons-grade hallucinogenics, among other things. She doesn't seem surprised by this at all, as if the whole evening is perfectly normal, and it's common to find one's date walking one's boyfriend through a bad trip, and asks me if I'm ready to go. I ask if we should be concerned about leaving the guy there when he's got several hours to go and a kid around, but she shrugs and assures me everything will be fine, so we head to the car. She starts driving, and we're discussing where to go for dinner. I know a really nice restaurant which she says is too fancy. I know a kind of nice restaurant, but she doesn't like their food. I know a quirky hole in the wall that's kind of gross but has fantastic food, but she doesn't want to go that way. She suggests Taco Bell. I make a noise that's somewhere between okay and really, which she takes as agreement. and we go to Taco Bell. At this point, I'm just happy to not be in the projects, and so I make the best of it, ordering a couple tacos and, being the gentleman, I pay when she orders what seems to be half the menu. My chance comes when she disappears into the bathroom. Without even thinking about it, I'm gone. I'm out the door and halfway down the block before I even realize what I'm doing. And I see in the distance, back at the Taco Bell, her burst out the door and look around, then start shouting for me to come back. And then I see her get in the car. But she's not going home, oh no, she's starting to look for me. This particular Taco Bell was on a main drag that backed up to kind of a residential neighborhood, so I wind up hiding behind hedges and shrubs as she patrols the streets looking for me. This goes on for 2 or 3 hours, with me skulking in the bushes as she circles the block and drives up and down the streets. I've dodged cops that were less determined. I managed to work my way back to my building, only to find her waiting in her car out front, but she didn't know about the back entrance, so I snuck in that way and left all my lights off. And locked and barricaded the door because, Jesus, the sight of someone strange lurking in the parking lot at that late hour prompts one of the neighbors to call the cops. She refuses to leave. She calls the cops a number of interesting profanities, judging by the screaming I hear from the parking lot, especially when they decided to take her in for disturbing the peace. And she took a swing at one of them, adding a resisting arrest charge to her collection. The next, and only time I see her, is in the newspaper the next day in the police blotter. Story 3. We were having a nice dinner of salmon and roast potatoes at a dining hall. As he started talking about his day, I took a bite of salmon and felt a horrible pain slide down my throat and stop. Not knowing what the fuck that was, I tried drinking some water. Deep in my throat, I felt like I was being stabbed, and every gulp only made it worse. I realized this must be that stupid thing my mother had always warned me about when eating fish, that you have to be careful of fish bones, or it will get stuck in your throat. Well, damn. I spotted some potatoes on my plate and started shoveling them in my mouth, to knock the bone out or push it down or whatever, as the guy starts telling me a joke. Well, the plan backfired, and once again, the pain became much, much worse. By now, it felt like someone had driven a screwdriver into my throat and was occasionally shoving it in deeper. So the guy finishes his joke and pauses as he looks at me, awaiting laughter. I burst into tears. He says, "That bad, huh? I'm sorry. I've got other jokes." And I manage to whisper, my voice not working so well, that I have a fish bone stuck in my throat. He blinks, but it's boneless salmon. I didn't really know how to respond to this, so I just stared at him with tears running down my face. He goes, "So, do you want to leave? What do you want to do?" And I whisper that maybe if we just get more potatoes, it will go away, right? 3 plates of potatoes later, I have a fishbone still in my throat and am bloated and never want to see a potato again in my life. This guy just watched in confused silence while I ate potatoes and cried. When I look up, he asks if it's still there. I nod, and we decide to go back to my room. As we pass by the salmon station in the dining hall, he points at the sign. "See? It's boneless." I didn't respond. When we get to my room, I called my mom, and she said I needed to go to the hospital to have it removed. Freaking out, I turned to go, and he insisted on coming with me to make sure I'd be okay. Sweet, right? Well, once there, he wouldn't leave. We waited 6 hours before any doctor or nurse would even see me in the ER, which I didn't mind. Some lady came into the bathroom while I was there, and suddenly blood was everywhere on the floor running into my stall. People definitely had bigger problems than my not being able to eat a fish properly. When a doctor came, it was some practicing med student who, without looking, said that most people think the bone is still there when it's not. Salmon bones don't show up on x-rays, so he told me to go home. I refused, having just had the bone partially dislodge, then relodge, punching a second hole in my throat. He said too bad and went to get me checkout forms. Well, the resident doc came and reamed this student guy out, and I'm thinking, oh, thank God, they're actually going to fix me now. Well, he told the student, "No, we won't release her until we're sure it's really gone. She could choke to death or it could puncture her lungs." Okay, really scary. But okay, they're going to fix it. So the doctor takes me into this room and the student comes trooping in after him. He brings in this weird boxy thing with a long cord, as thick as your average electrical cord, with a slightly larger thing on one end. He tells me that, luckily for me, there's this new technology that can pick up salmon bones, and all they have to do is stick this cord through my nose and down my throat. I was not a fan of this idea. Worse, he said he didn't have time to do this, and it would be good practice for the med student to try it his first time. Worse still, all the med students and nurses in this fucking ward come trooping in to see this new technology. And worse even more, the med kid is now nervous and his hands are shaking. So they spray some numbing stuff into my nose. Most of it missed and just got on my nose. And then this kid with shaking hands tries to stick an electrical cord camera down my nose while 15 people watch. So I, who had managed to toughen up and stop crying hours ago, felt an electrical cord thing go into my nose and then came pain. Yeah, I started crying again. Not sobbing or anything. Just tears rolling down my cheeks out of sheer pain. This apparently freaked this kid out more and the shaking got worse. I didn't need to see it. I could feel it in my nose. Oh yeah. And to get me into this side room, they kicked a tiny little old dying lady with nasal cannulas out, and she was shooting me death looks from the hall at intervals. So the camera cord finally goes in and the kid looks through and can see the bone. Kid. Uh-oh. It's right there, in her vocal cords. That could mean serious damage. So he takes it out and the docs arrange for an ear, nose, and throat doc to come the next morning to remove it. But they say they cannot do it themselves because they may permanently damage my vocal cords. Awesome. Here's the best part. The 15 folks watching the camera chopped cord procedure all wanted a turn. The resident doc came in and told me how important it is that people get experience, and how if they don't get it, they could end up doing things slowly poorly on people who could die at any second. So I felt bad and gave them permission, all 15 of them, to practice with the camera cord thing on me. This was an hour-and-a-half ordeal of them sticking things in my nose and me crying and them pulling it out again and lecturing each other on technique and such. So this entire time, the poor guy I was on a date with is sitting in the waiting room. Has been about 8 hours now, it's a school night, and it's 3 a.m. A nurse comes in and gives me a pill and says it will relax me before this operation and will numb the throat stuffs. And she says it may make me gassy. This is about when the nurses realized I had someone waiting for me in the waiting room and told him he could come back and visit me. Yeah, while I was numbed up and not aware of much and gassy. Awesome. The next morning they put me under, got the bone out, and sent me on my way. At classes in the afternoon, I had a spontaneous nosebleed that was pretty bad. Tried to cover it up with tissues until the person next to me turned, saw a ton of bloody tissues, and their eyes got really wide. I left. The guy texted me several days later and kindly asked if I wanted to try redoing our first date. I told him I'd be happy to. Hey, thanks for watching. If you have made it this far into the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more daily Reddit stories. See you in the next one.